Those familiar words. So hello, everyone. My name is Liz Beaven, and it's a real pleasure to be here tonight and to have spent the day on the campus, peeking into classrooms and looking at plays and talking with folk and just enjoying the incredible beauty of the setting. And hello, and sort of reminding myself, this is school. This is a school right now. It's pretty remarkable. So thanks for the invitation and thanks for turning out. I know life is busy and it's hard to get out in the evening. And I would like, I have a few things I'd like to discuss together, but I would also like to encourage you to stop me at any point, ask questions if I'm not making sense, which is entirely possible, or if you want clarifications on anything. So just a little bit about me so you know what my frame of reference is. As you can hear, I am not American by birth, but I've lived in this country for a very long time. I grew up in New Zealand, and I stumbled across I also said as a high school student when my headmaster suggested that nursing, banking, or bank assistant or teaching would be a really good job for me. It was a very liberal society. I remember thinking that I was definitely not going to be a teacher. No way was I going to be a teacher. I've spent most of my life in schools. So be careful what you say you are and are not going to do as a young person. And I came across Waldorf education as a parent, which I think is significant. It's quite common. With a 5-year-old when we had newly moved to the middle of New York City in the 80s, I hate to say, to give you an idea of how long I've been around this. And I found myself with a very happy kindergarten child and a parent, me, learning to adjust to Manhattan and also going, what is this place that I've walked into that they have my son? What is this education? What are they doing? And I feel as if since then, I have been walking around asking, what is this education? What is this approach? What are they doing? And I've answered it in different ways at different times. And I think these questions now about what is education in general and what is this education and what are we doing are really important. They're really important questions for us to stop and pay attention to because they involve our children. Right? I have 2 fully grown sons in 2 very different professions, very different, amazingly different. I have 5 grandchildren. And so now I'm having the privilege and concern of watching the next generation with their education, their childhood, their futures. And so it's a subject of real interest to me as to how are we educating our children and what do they need and what do we need? So before we go any further, and the people on the recording won't be able to do this, but that's okay. I'd like to know first just a little bit of a question of a general idea of who I'm speaking with. So please raise your hand if you are a parent. Keep it up if you're a grandparent. Okay, we got the grandparents' corner over here by the fire. Raise your hand if you have 1 child. Add your hand if you've got 2, 3, more than 3. Okay. And then how many of you have a kindergarten or younger child? K or younger? Not as heavy as usual. 1st grade. I got to watch 1st grade for a while this morning. It was fun. 2nd grade. 3rd grade. Getting up there. 4th grade. Our actors today. 5th grade. Yeah, some of you will have your hand up once. Yeah, you're getting a little aerobic workout. Am I up to 6th grade? 7th. Now we're stepping away from the school. 8th. High school. College. Okay. So we've got actually a real range of ages, which is nice. Now, you thought you were just going to come and listen, but now we're going to do some work together. I would like us together to pay a little bit of attention to what it is that we think our children need. Yeah, which I'm assuming is something, what do they need? Which I'm assuming is something we've all thought about now and for their future. Because we are talking about childhood, and one thing the grandmas over here can tell you is it goes really quickly, but sometimes it feels as if it's taking forever. Is that fair? Yeah. Before we do that, though, I just do want to acknowledge, because the context of this changed, and I'm just going to put it right out there, and it might not be on any of your minds, and you might not have thought about it, in which case we'll just move straight on. But the fact is that I am speaking tonight in a week when there was another school shooting, right? And we want and expect our children, I think, to be safe. And we expect schools to be places where they are safe. And so these events, aside from the tragedy and all of the questions that come with them, I think for parents are really disturbing. And so I just want to acknowledge that, because some of the things we are going to talk about tonight are not actually about safety in the conventional sense. And so, you know, this is an issue that we're all worried, I think, about the safety of our children. Is that a fair general statement? So let's acknowledge that, and then let's dig in a little bit. So the question I'm asking you first is not needs, and we can just do popcorn, and if I were really energetic, I'd write them up, but we'll remember them, and we're recording them by the marvels of modern technology. If you just take a moment, what are your hopes for your children? What do you want for them? What are your hopes for them, your children? Hi. And you can just call them on out. Happiness. Confidence. Confidence. Happiness. Sorry? Being embodied. Sorry? Knowing oneself. Same thing. Inquisitive. Emotional intelligence. Service.
They're worthy.
That they feel worthy, or they are worthy, both probably.
Loved to know love.
Loved to know love.
They're adaptive.
Adaptive. What else?
Healthy relationships.
Healthy relationships, able to relate and relate healthily. Okay. Kindness.
Communication.
Healthy communications.
Thriving community.
Thriving community, and the ability to help sustain one. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to change it just slightly, and there's some overlap. When you think about your children now and in the future, what do they need?
Need skills.
They need skills. Like what?
They need to know how to take care of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like my kids to know a little bit how to take care of others.
Yes.
And they have needs.
Yes.
They need to know how to swim.
Yes.
They need to know how to read.
Mm-hmm.
They need to know how to do some computation.
Great.
I'd like them to know how to, survive.
Yep.
In a lot of different ways.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you. Other things that was a pretty good comprehensive list. Other things, yes. Resilience. Yes. Likely in fairly large doses. Good. Self-advocacy. Support. Yep. The basic need.
Knowing their boundaries and knowing what is safe and not safe and navigate.
Great.
The world.
Boundaries. Where am I? Where are others? What's safe? What's not? Yeah. Yes. Relational and communicative skills. Love. Yeah. In fact, those dreadful, dreadful experiments way back when I was in college, not at my university, but reading about them, that children who do not have attachment and love, at best, don't thrive. At best. Yeah.
Like the
have the skill of being able to work with situation that's given, you know, all of the variables and be able to create beauty with what they're given or something that's functional.
So I'm repeating these so that we get them on the recording. Working with whatever the situation is, with adaptability, creativity, and with a goal of turning something beautiful as a result. Yeah. Yeah.
Consent.
Consent. Okay. Tell me what that means.
Understanding that they are empowered enough to have consent in different situations and to seek consent from others.
Okay.
In relations.
Yep. So that in a way is around safety. I keep myself safe and I'm on the lookout for the safety of others in a way. Yep. Any others that we've missed? We've missed lots, but
Like a lot of different tributaries that like create who they are as a person. And feeling the like groundedness in that. I think a lot of people have said about that authenticity and that like knowing, but I think like more tributary, you know, more tributaries should have as a person and an individual, different interests, more community, healthier.
So wide range of stuff that they have available to them. So yes.
Passion for an understanding of differences.
Compassion for an understanding of differences. Nice. So are our hopes for our children and what they need, are they the same? Are we talking about the same things with hopes and needs? Overlap. There's some overlap and there's some separation, right? Now I'm going to ask you another question. We all raised our hands when we said we're parents, right? I think we all did. And we all have children in school or grandchildren. And we are sitting in a school at a school parent evening. And we did talk about some skills, but what has not been on our list so far?
Species learning.
Academic rigor.
Test scores.
For those listening in, academic rigor, test scores, formal learning. Weird? No, I'm seeing heads shaking. It's not weird. Why not? We're at a school.
It's not our priority here. I mean, we're here as a community that has somewhat of a similar desire for our children.
Yep.
It's also done in a manner that's important to how we live our lives. So it's separate.
So the academic learning is woven in. So, okay, that's a valid point, except I've done this exercise with many, many different groups of parents in many, many different schools. And I've never had anyone mention SAT scores or college entrance. Ever. Even though those things are important, they are not primary drivers for most parents when we think about what our children need and what we hope and want for them. They are mechanisms, right? Unfortunately, in our modern culture, they've often become dominant rather than mechanisms, right? But they're not the things you're talking about. And so we are going to talk more about those soft skills, some of those qualities that you have mentioned, because the reality is they have to be developed for the other to come along. That's the reality. Yeah. And there was another hand up.
I was just saying, I think that all of those other needs are taken care of. The other stuff is very easy. And you can learn it very quickly.
Many children can. Yes. Yeah. Not all, but many. Yes. Yes. So, okay. Now, I just want to, let's do the gloomy. We started gloomy, but let's get more gloomy for a while and then switch a little bit. So we've just come, we're not out of. We are hopefully emerging from a very disruptive period of human history, right? And if our children are little, then that's been a large percentage of their lives so far. If they are in the lower grades or kindergarten, that's been their schooling experience, etc. So what are we talking about? What has been disruptive for us? Pandemic? the COVID-19 pandemic. That was a well-timed cough.
Right.
Isolation that came with that. Yeah, we all got sent to our rooms, children in tow, right? I mean, do you remember how weird it was?
Fear of fellow.
Yes.
Fear of fellow human beings. The interesting thing about this pandemic was that it attacked our breath, our breathing, and it made you a threat to me, right? Two very interesting, strong things in human communities. So we all isolated, and then there were all the social breakdowns around what was the right way to respond to this and not the right way, and we're not going to go there. We're not going to spend time on it tonight because I don't think it's solvable. We have different opinions on this whole situation, but there was more than one pandemic going on. What else happened in that same time period that disrupted us? He came first.
There is a second public health emergency, like declared and officially opioid overdose. I don't know if that's what you're talking about, but
That's one.
Just the technological takeover of education.
Technological takeover. Me Too movement, the whole rising up of Black Lives Matter, of women's rights, of social justice issues. And there's one more big one that is becoming more and more evident. Climate change. What, and again, whatever terms we want to use for that, depending on our view of it, something's going on. So we've got this, at best, unstable world that you are navigating as parents, right? And you, in that, have this desire that all parents have to know that your children are safe and that this particular story is going to turn out well. Yeah, is that a fair thought that you've all had, that we want them safe? We want them to be able to, we want to protect them as we navigate through this, whatever that is. Oops, okay. And we want good outcomes. Yeah. Okay. So there's a lot of stuff that could keep you awake at night around that. Yeah, especially when we look at these children. However, there are different ways of looking at this. One, clearly life has been disrupted. I think we could all agree on that. Two, clearly we're not going back to life the way it used to be, whatever that was. We're not going backwards, right? Toothpaste thoroughly out of that tube. Three, there are different ways of looking at this. So our children are in this world now. The future is much more theirs than ours. It's certainly much more theirs than mine. And they're on a path into that future. We have a couple of ways of looking at this. We can, and they'll all be active at different times. This is a terrible tragedy. It's a burden. It's these poor, damaged, deprived children who have gone through this disruption, are still dealing with it. And we can focus in on that. And there's truth to it. You know, particularly if you had a high school student during the pandemic, there's stuff they can't get back. Important developmental experiences that they won't get, they won't have. So do we view this as a tragedy in which our children are key players? Or do we take an attitude that I heard someone else say, I refuse to feel sorry for these children because of these experiences that they are having and have had. They might be the most resilient generation of children ever. So two really extreme points of view, and we are probably all somewhere between those 2 points of view, and we probably move depending on what is going on in our lives and what's happening to our children. So they're victims of a terrible tragedy and they've had their childhood destroyed, or they are, because of this, like, you know, forge me with fire, they are developing strengths and they're actually really resilient. I go between them personally. I've got both. So let's keep that one in mind. But we've already several times used this word resilient. So what do we mean by resilient? Let's see if we can get some common definitions. Let me hear from you, then I'll tell you what I think it is. What does it mean to be resilient? Yeah.
It's like being able to regulate emotion.
Regulate.
Feeling the emotion
Mhm.
and being able to regulate it
Nice.
and feeling it and regulating it. I think that is a sign of resilience.
It's better than what I've got. So let's have that one. More. What else?
Recovering.
Recovering easily. Or even if not easily, recovering.
Yeah.
Yep. What else?
You said adaptive earlier. too.
Adaptive. Yep.
The ability to continue moving forward and face challenge.
Mhm.
Growth despite whatever the circumstance.
Or possibly growth because of the circumstances.
I just think of grass seeds and fires and, you know, the cycling and getting singed to the ground and back and requiring the, you know,
Mhm.
devastation to
Mhm.
spark.
Which we see in some of our biggest trees. Yeah, that fire is an essential part. Destruction is an essential. Now, we don't want destruction,
No.
but it's an
but that's the
interesting matter.
extreme
Yeah,
example of
exactly.
resilience.
Yeah, yeah. So, yes, resilience, if we look at, you know, we do Psych 101 and we look at the definition, the ability to manage difficulty and obstacles and to keep trying, right? Resilience provides, and this is where it gets important, protection against adverse circumstances. If I'm resilient, adversity doesn't have the same effect on me. These have been mentioned. It includes self-regulation and autonomy, a sense that I'm here. I have capacities. I have strength. It involves high-level skills like curiosity, interest, tenacity. It involves grit. There's a whole study on grit, not sandpaper, although it's got some similarities. There's actually a grit inventory where you can test how gritty you are. And grit is an interesting thing, but resilience includes grittiness, right? It is a growth mindset. I'm adaptable, I can learn, I can expand, I can change, yeah? Rather than a fixed mindset. This is who I am, it's what I'm stuck with, it's what I was given, and there's nothing much I can do about it. I want you to ask yourselves which one of those two you prefer for your child. And I know we all voted for that, I'm stuck with it. So it's also this idea that we can go just beyond, regularly, just beyond our comfort zone in learning. Comfort does not really develop resilience. We've got to be tested a bit. So this is the whole idea of the zone of proximal development, that we are providing circumstances for our children where we can stretch them just beyond where something is achievable, but they haven't already mastered it. Right? And so we are constantly sort of building situations where they are able to reach and stretch. This spurs their development. It's a really good thing, but it's not comfortable. Then within that, there is this the idea of discipline. It's not a popular word in the 2020s. Because we have a whole bunch of baggage around discipline, at least I did a bit, but then, you know, you were allowed to hit children when I went to school. So that's a long time ago. But discipline actually means three different things, right? So one is punishment, that from outside you are punished to correct behavior. So that's one type of discipline. Another is and that could be physical, Another is instruction or teaching. So if you think of the word being a disciple of someone, but the relationship between a teacher of whatever kind and a student, that's a type of discipline. And then the third is inner discipline or self-discipline. That's the autonomy piece. So discipline is really important. And, you know, we don't want to go back to the days of physical punishment. There's all sorts of research showing that that's really not a good thing. But we do want to talk about discipline. So why? Because discipline involves boundaries, and boundaries allow a child to feel safe. They know where they stand. They know where the safe zone is. And so we have, and boundaries actually help develop a sense of belonging, which is vital for a child's well-being. So we want clear boundaries. We want discipline about what those, and agreements about what those boundaries are. So for a school, you actually want school-wide agreements on acceptable behavior, not acceptable behavior, how we work with that. And we want to be really clear with children what is acceptable and what is not, even the little ones, because their safety depends on it. And we've all agreed we want our children to be safe. We, you know, I don't think this is anyone here, but if so, then sorry, I'm going to be rude. There's a generation of younger workers hitting the industries right now who were brought up in the every child gets a trophy period of childhood, where I think this may have died down, but oh, you breathed. Congratulations. Like everything, this excessive and not real praise for children. That was a real wave through parenting for a while to try to support self-esteem, all done with the best of intentions. But that actually does not help a child because they don't know where they stand. They don't have a gauge of, I can't quite do this yet. They don't have the gift of struggle. And it's really shocking when they come up against other children who've been told they're at least equally marvelous. And, you know, all children are marvelous. They are incredible. What children do is, childhood is amazing. But if it's puffed and not grounded, and we quickly become externalized in terms of needing the other to drive and build that growth and learning, rather than it being what we all said we want, self-driven. So boundaries are part of discipline. And I say again, discipline is part of what helps children to feel safe. And the idea when we are talking about discipline is, one, you know, we have to be really clear about behaviors. So an extreme example is if I'm with my child on a sidewalk and they go to dart out into the street. I need to act and be really clear that we don't do that. And I need to pull them back into the agreed safe zone, right? Now that's an extreme. But it helps us think about other examples where we need to be really clear about acceptable, not acceptable behaviors and pull them back into a safe zone. Any thoughts on that?
I don't have a thought about that specifically, but I was thinking about how so many of us, the word good job fly out of our mouth
Do it too.
and our children
Yeah.
really are just doing sort of regular
Mhm.
things.
Mhm.
And I guess I'm thinking about that because and I think about this with my students too, saying good job to them is so non-specific,
Yeah.
it means nothing.
Yeah.
Whereas if I, you know, have said, if I'm going to give them any praise at all or any assessment at all, seems to feel important to talk about the details, comment on the details, not just this don't know. And then I just also thought about how my midwife was telling a story about parents that she had been working with who, as we all do when our children were like, oh my gosh, never ever have there been a gorgeous, amazing, perfect baby. And her response was, your child is absolutely so special.
Yeah.
And then she waited at the beach, just like everybody.
Mhm, mhm.
I can speak from my personal experience. I think my mother was ahead of the curve on the affirmation
Uh-huh.
train. And, you know, it left me, you know, I internalized her being smitten with me.
Yeah.
Which obviously has advantages, but when I encountered things that I was not immediately good at,
Mhm,
I was at a disadvantage
mhm.
to like work through it and push through it and be bad at it for a while.
Yeah.
And I think that the way I thought about it is that I was being praised for, and I've heard this in the growth mentalities, that I was being praised for outcomes.
Yeah.
Instead of effort.
Mhm.
And when you praise kids' attributes and they're like just going about their normal business, they haven't really worked that much or struggled that much. And maybe doesn't merit that much praise.
Mhm. Mhm. But you're describing in a way you didn't quite know where you were standing.
Mm.
Yeah. And praise that is generous, excessive, false praise in a way, actually is giving the child mixed messages or incorrect feedback. And yeah, this good job thing, I have found I've fallen into it completely. Good job. Like, yeah, you did something relatively, normal. But I think one of the places we get stuck is there's a couple of pieces here. One is that we do need to manage children's behavior. In our list of what we wanted for them, there was some social emotional intelligence and things like that. We're responsible for teaching them how to be social human beings. And if it's all based on puffed praise, we're not giving them quite a clear roadmap. So, and I think one thing we also get muddled with, and I will again put myself right there, is that behavior management, which is our responsibility, does not equate to shaming, or at least it shouldn't. We're addressing the behavior and correcting it, not the child, right? And I think, speaking for myself, I think we get those confused. No, we don't want to shame children, but we do need to correct behavior, set boundaries, keep them safe, let them know what is acceptable. And we really can't be airy-fairy. It doesn't work to sing a song when we're having to immediately correct a behavior that might have a safety issue involved in it. We can't be airy-fairy about the safety of the child or of others, right? So if as a community we value safety, we also have to be clear that along with that comes a responsibility to have clear guidelines and boundaries. And that's a big aspect of discipline. Does that make sense? And I think it's tough for all of us, especially if we're feeling sorry for these children who've just come through the pandemic, right? I think it's hard to navigate it, but I think it's important. So what does get in the way of boundaries, discipline, et cetera, and then we'll talk about the consequences of and what we can do to make sure they have these experiences. Here are some of the things I identified as we all want to protect our children. I mean, we have a responsibility to protect them, going back to that moment when they arrive, and this vast feeling of, I want your life to be perfect and I'm going to do whatever I have to do to protect you. But that is different than cushioning our children from life. We want to protect them, not cushion them. I think one of the things that gets in the way is that our modern society is very product oriented, outcomes oriented. And so it's harder for us to be in process. I think that's in the way of both resilience and discipline. I unfortunately think our fears and anxieties get in the way of having boundaries, discipline, and developing resilience. We want their world to be good. The huge, and this one's going to be a little odd because we're talking about safety, but the huge emphasis on safety actually gets in our way. Richard Louv, who was the pioneer in the idea of nature deficit, of the, not exactly a problem here, but the idea that children must be connected to nature and all of the benefits of that, said, we've developed this container generation. We carton, we put them in, we've got them very contained for safety. Now, this was in relation to nature, but actually our emphasis on safety is in our way. I'll talk a little bit more about that. I think what's in our way, and is this from our own experiences of media, of what we've grown up with, or what is it? I think what is in our way is the idea that life should be fun and entertaining. We want life to have fun and entertainment. But if you look at your own life, most people's lives are about growth and development and successes and happiness and struggle and grief. And it's not fun, right? It was false advertising. It's a whole lot of things, but it's grittier than constant entertainment. I think another one that, again, guilty as charged, I think our children are dealing with adults who are here but not present. Walking the stroller, holding the child while we're on the phone. And I think this was heightened when many people were working at home. So the children had this experience of you're there, but you're not there. And they act out then. They're pretty good at sending up a red flag. But if I'm really busy with my phone, I'm just going to say, wait. So I do think this is an issue for children. I spoke with the faculty earlier and a joke, but it's true. I have a minor panic attack if I leave the house and realize I've left my phone behind. I don't know how I managed for all the years I didn't have a phone, but there's this dependency that we've all developed on the immediacy and the access of a phone that often means we are here but not present. So our children are getting these interesting messages around where they fit in all of this. I don't know what we do with it. I really don't, but I think it's a factor. So some things that are in the way. One of the things that can happen as a result of this, and now we are talking school, is that schools have to have discipline and they have to have boundaries and they have to have rules, and children have to take their place with other children, which is not always the experience of a modern child, one among many. And so one of the things that can happen is the school or the teacher becomes identified as the problem. The discipline is too strong. These boundaries are not reasonable. You picked on my child. I'm not saying none of this ever happens, but this can be a dynamic when we are talking discipline, rules, boundaries. And, it's a pretty easy target because the schools have to have these things. And then another thing that I think is in the way is the question of who sets the rules. Do we have agreement on standards? A school, needs to work towards having agreement so the children are consistently treated in a way that they can understand. But a school isn't just what happens during those hours of the school. All of those children come from very different backgrounds, very different standards. So, what are our baselines around discipline, boundaries, rules, not words that we necessarily like. Does this make sense? Yeah. So I want to come back to and then I want to make sure we've got a little time just to whatever's living. I want to come back to this question of resilience. I don't know whether you all know this, but several of you have children in kindergarten and first grade, right? Could you raise your hands again if you have some of the little ones, or younger, if you've got little ones on their way here? Your children, at least, and probably some of the older children, when they are young adults, are going to 70% of them, close to 70% of them, are going to be doing careers that have not yet been invented, that don't yet exist, right? 65 to 70%. That figure, it was a piece of research, so it must be right. That figure was before the pandemic. I would say the changes of how we work and how we are relating to the world are such that it's probably higher. So imagine that. That's why we're not talking about SAT scores and academics when we talk about what the children need or what they want. We're talking about things like adaptability and creativity and these human capacities, so-called soft capacities. They are more than at any other time. And again, I don't want to be scary because it's actually sort of exciting. More than any other time in human history, your children are going to be charting an unknown future, an unknowable future. And what do they have to do that? What do they need to do that? One, they have the remarkable ingenuity of being human, right? We make dreadful messes, and we have an amazing capacity to find new solutions. We don't know what they're going to be. We can't promise what this is all going to look like, but we do know that we don't know, right? My childhood, it was relatively predictable what the steps would be, and then it all went crazy. And now, the pace of change is so high at this stage that we may have exceeded ourselves. But so we want resilient children. We want children who can navigate successfully and compassionately and kindly, who can find new solutions, who can say, I can do that, who can pick themselves up if they get knocks. Chances are high that they will. They've probably all had a few skin knees already. Yeah. We need them to be flexible thinkers. And so then we come to, because I have to, Waldorf education and a Waldorf approach to the child. Because let's just, if I were drawing here, I do you a picture, not a very good one, of a human being, and put some of the things around it. I'm going to list them. These are things we know develop resilience in children. And then you can chart them out to the type of education your children are having here. So here's my incomplete list of the things that develop resilience: rhythm, repetition, practice, boundaries, safe risk-taking. Children have to take risks, and it's actually essential for academic learning, which we weren't so interested in. It's actually part of reading, and it's a requirement for reading. And it is a wonderful help. If they can do risk-taking as children, they might be better in their choices of risk-taking as adolescents, where their prefrontal cortex abandons them for a little bit. So risk-taking is actually really important, and it goes against the grain for parents who want to keep their children safe, right? The arts, and the many, many lessons that the arts teach. It takes courage to stand in front of a blank piece of paper, which your children do all the time, and put a mark on it and to begin to develop it. But they are developing all sorts of senses of decision making, of aesthetics, of relationship, and they are taking risks and expressing courage. That's part of resilience. Crafts, the same, to stand in front of a piece of wood and know that you're going to permanently change it. And then you have to live with that and work with it. That's resilience. Encounters with nature, the lessons that nature teaches, the cycle of life that you mentioned so nicely, the regeneration of nature, the rhythms of the year. So nature, encounters with nature develop resilience. Story, either for the younger ones, stories that give them pictures of human courage and facing obstacles and trying again, or when they get older, biographies of real life people who did those things when they're a little bit older. World languages develop resilience. They allow us to have a different experience of the self and the other, and they take courage. Any of us who've tried to fumble our way through a different language. Play. Play is an essential ingredient in developing resilience, but you have to add play, not too heavily supervised. Free play. Ability to sort stuff out themselves within bounds of reasonable safety. Trust is an important ingredient for resilience. Knowing what they can trust, that's relationships and community. Loving authority, knowing who's in charge, that is part for a child of developing this capacity of resilience. And then two more, and then I'll stop, I promise. One is failure. Not being good at everything. If you have a broad curriculum, almost every child is going to have something that they can take up easily and something that's going to be really hard. And this helps me set my understanding of myself and what is needed to learn and to succeed, which for most children involves an element of struggle. That's resilience. Because part of learning anything is the boring part as well, the practice, the repetition, the sticking with it, the being interested in the outcomes, all resilient behavior. So grit, this grittiness and self-control develop through failure. Interesting thought, how you'd think it would be the opposite. And then the last one is the idea of not yet. Not that I'm a failure or I'm shamed or I'm hopeless, but that I can't quite do something yet, but the possibility is there. That's key to resilience. I can pick myself up, I can keep trying, I can keep learning. I understand that the development of my abilities and my potential is possible for me. Then I go into the world with my backpack on, with a really good package of resilience to draw from when I navigate this very uncertain world. So I think we probably all agree on this. The question then comes, where does it get sticky and stuck in something like a school? But thoughts, things that you don't agree with or are not clear, what stands out for you? And then how do we apply that to this school community?
I like what you said about failure. I think that's so important, especially in this culture that's always rushing and